So good afternoon. It is May 14th, 2024, and I'm going to be walking through a few slides that talk about the current proposed aluminum sulfate treatment for Spring Lake in Spring Lake Township, Michigan. I want to bring to attention that based on a FOIA that I received, or I requested, I should say, from the state of Michigan, from AGL, which is formerly DEQ, it was noted that there was an alum spill during the 2005 alum treatment in Spring Lake of 46,000 gallons of liquid concentrated aluminum sulfate. This is a problem because if you look at the date that this was reported, it's 2008. So this is something that was kind of swept under the rug potentially. It was not dealt with very quickly after it happened. And that is a big concern because this is proposed to occur again in Spring Lake, and people are paying a lot of funds for this. I believe well over $600 per year per riparian for the next 10 years. So this is a concern, and obviously when we look through what had to be sampled to show that there was non-toxic impacts, it's quite extensive. So that is a concern I have. Another concern is that if we look at this total phosphorus concentration graph, this is the graph in the middle of this slide, we can see that there is a dark line that basically goes through the graph, and that dark line represents what we call the eutrophic threshold, which is basically the concentration that we want to stay below in order to have a healthy lake. So below the eutrophic threshold, we have lower nutrients. That leads to lower release of phosphorus, and that leads to lower amounts of blue-green algae in particular, but all forms of algae and certainly overgrowth of aquatic vegetation. And what's disappointing is if we look at this graph, we can see that even after the alum treatment, most years, actually many of the years, far exceeded this eutrophic threshold. So there was definitely an increase in the phosphorus even after the alum treatment. So the whole purpose of an alum treatment is to reduce phosphorus. And if it can't do that, then why is this even being considered right now as another as an alternative to do again? So that in my professional opinion, we have two strikes. We have the spill that could happen anytime again, and we also have something that's not effective, but then they're proposing to do it again. So I have some concerns about this as a lake professional myself. And it also brings up another question. What about the bayous? The bayous are not included in the alum delivery, so they are not getting any benefit. Now, I understand that they're being assessed less per year, but they're only receiving herbicides and algicides. And the bayous are the most critically impaired parts of Spring Lake. So that's a concern. We have the bayous emptying into the lake basin itself. So if we don't address the bayous, it's going to make the lake worse, and it's going to undermine the efficacy of any of the strategies that are used in the basin. I also want to point out that a lot of the bayous, all the bayous in fact, have significant real estate, municipal capital around them. So they're certainly just as worthy of improving as the lake basin homes. This is a picture of what one of the bayous looks like today. I was out with my camera, and you can just see a lot of scum, a lot of filamentous algae. This isn't toxic stuff, but it's definitely not nice to look at, and certainly nobody would want to wade into the water with that present. Another one, this is over on Lloyd's Bayou today. This is all rhizoclonium algae, which is a filamentous green algae. And certainly, you know, who wants to get their wave runners out or their swim platforms out with this kind of condition? So the bayous are really being left behind in the current treatment program. I do want to point out some pictures that were taken 2009, you know, through 2023. So this was just a few years after the alum treatment in 2005. We can see that this is over, I believe this is Jerusalem Bayou. So this is just a little bit more towards the Muskegon County line. But we see that in July of 2009, we had a lot of blue-green algae throughout the entire bayou. And keep in mind that, you know, the drains that are going into these bayous are really what's feeding the problem. And then, of course, they're draining into the lake. So that's a concern. This is an area over by Jerusalem Bayou too. And you can kind of see in the background that plant that looks kind of cornstalkish. That's invasive Phragmites. And certainly that is something that we wouldn't want to see, you know, there because it's invasive. So that's something that wasn't addressed at the time either. So certainly not good management. We can kind of see the slick on that picture of the blue-green algae. And then again, another one at the back of one of the other bayous, we have that microcystis toxic scum of blue-green algae on the surface. So there's a lot of different concerns. I already raised a couple of them. We also know that aluminum sulfate is toxic at both low and high pH values. There are scientific papers that can support all of these claims. Toxicity in fish and zooplankton, as well as some macroinvertebrates. There's been scientifically peer-reviewed studies that document that. Also, inability to reduce the phosphorus enough to reduce the blue-green algal blooms, as we saw in that graph, not really making a difference. Obviously, this is a kind of a program that requires a lot of oversight that apparently didn't happen. And so that is a big concern. And at best, we're talking about a short term or what we call Band-Aid solution. That's really not what our lake needs. We need to restore our lake once and for all. And of course, a blatant absence of improvements in the bayous, right? We're just relying on herbicides and algicides for the bayous when we need to be talking nutrient mitigation and reduction and all the other improvements that some experts are aware of. So other options and concerns, there are a lot of different lake restoration programs out there that haven't been looked at by the Spring Lake Improvement Board. And there are a lot of qualified professionals out there that have better, more effective options. They have not been given a chance to bid on this project. Under Public Act 451, which is the Lake Improvement Board Act, they are supposed to, and they shall, it says, submit bids in the beginning of the program, and that was never done. That contract was given to a vendor, and that vendor has remained as the consultant since the beginning of the board. So there's a lot of talent that's being missed out there, and I think that needs to be looked at. And probably the most significant part of this slide is the watershed management aspect. That's being disregarded. If you look at the current budget for watershed management, only $10,000 is allocated. And that would basically cover brochures and information dissemination. That wouldn't include solutions. So that is what I think needs to happen in order to make this situation right. So I'm hoping you will elect me as a trustee to the Board of Trustees this November. I've got to get through the primary in August. And I will be able to help this lake in many ways. I don't want to sell my business for this particular lake, but I'm willing to work with the township to find better care for the lake and a suitable vendor to do the job. So it's about time. I mean, we're in 2024 now, halfway through, and we have to make this right. So I will provide more updates as the summer goes along. Feel free to attend our launch party this coming Monday at the Spring Lake Library, the Township Library, from 5 to 8. And we will be there to answer questions. I will be there to answer a lot of questions that I'm sure I'm going to get about the lake and what we can do about it. So thanks for your time, and we will be in touch.